So we'll just go on with the podcast like we normally do. So, welcome to Peace Talks. I'm Caitlin Richards.
I'm Alex Garrison.
I'm Will Dalton.
Andre Tidwell.
Marvin Bronson.
All right, so we're going to start off with a little bit of sports. In Peace Sports this week, the men's basketball team beat Hamden and Sydney 96-71 was the final score. Smith Gupton led the scoring with 19 points on 66% shooting. Pacers are now 1-2 in their season. Their next game will be November 21st at Emory and Henry. The women's basketball team lost to Fredericksburg University. They got knocked out of the Hyatt Place tip-off tournament. The final score of that game was 63-48. The next game they will play is a little while longer. It won't be till November 27th, and that will be against Shaw University here at William Peace. And now for sports outside of William Peace, the latest on the Alex Smith injury that most of you saw. Yesterday, he is the Redskins quarterback. He suffered a compound leg fracture against the Titans. The Redskins lost that game 23-21. It's been confirmed he will be out for the season, but the real question is, how will he come back? Will he be the same? It's just a matter of time to wait and see. The Ravens quarterback, Lamar Jackson, made his NFL debut yesterday as a starter. They won 24-21 against the Bengals. He rushed for 117 yards and went 13 of 19 passing. His entire first drive was 11 plays, all of him rushing, and he ended up rushing for a touchdown. He actually set the NFL record for most rushing yards by a quarterback in his first career start. And so now I'm going to do a segment that's a little bit new. I'm going to do 10 interesting sports facts that you might not know. So number one, NFL referees actually receive Super Bowl rings. They're not as big as the rings that the teams get, but they actually get a commemorative ring to show that they officiated. The next fact, despite a baseball game taking 2 to 3 hours to finish, the actual action of the game that takes place when nobody's just standing around doing nothing is actually a total of 18 minutes. Next fact, in 1943, because of so many players in football having to serve in World War II, the Eagles and the Steelers actually combined to make one complete team called the Steagles. The Olympic gold medals are actually made of silver, not gold. Didn't know that.
That's fraud.
I did not know that. There has never been a documented perfect March Madness bracket, ever. The Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders were the first official cheerleading team in the NFL, and they formed in 1972. Golf is actually the only sport to be played on the moon. It was played by Alan Shepard in 1971. Shaq has missed a total of 5,317 free throws in his career. And the last two facts. Live pigeon shooting was briefly an Olympic sport at the 1900 Olympic Games in Paris. Facts. And finally, the ancient Greeks received a stick of celery for winning sports events. We get millions of dollars in trophies, and they got celery. So,
Be healthy.
there is your sports report for today.
Thanksgiving break begins tomorrow. Excited about that. When back from holiday break on November 26th, there'll be the annual holiday celebration here from 6 to 8 p.m.
WPU's performance of Beauty and the Beast this past weekend was a success. 4 out of the 5 shows were sold out, which is the most that's ever been sold out in Peace history. And this now leads to our next discussion of different ways to interpret cartoons and Disney movies.
Now, you know how some cartoons and some older Disney movies have different meanings than the ones that are actually on the screen and what they show to you. Like, for example, Beauty and the Beast. The Beast can symbolize how somebody is viewed in the eyes of other people, or how the general view is in America. Or it could be just somebody that maybe appeared as uglier in one person's eyes, but beautiful in another person's eyes. It's a lot of things that people can or can't see because of their perceptions clouding their mind when they see one person. That person is beautiful in the eyes of one and maybe ugly in the eyes of another, but they're still, at the end of the day, a human being or a creature in general.
So is it like saying the beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Is that type of thing?
Yeah.
Or it could be kind of like, don't judge a book by its cover, like, until you really get to know somebody. Like, he was like a beast where everybody was scared of him, but then Belle actually went to him and she wasn't scared of him, and she even taught him things. So it could be like, don't judge somebody before you know them.
Right. Man, have any of y'all seen the Avengers Infinity War?
Still haven't seen it. I have no idea.
Bits and pieces of it.
You notice how Thanos threw his daughter off the cliff and killed her? That could symbolize sometimes you gotta sacrifice what you love to get what you want.
Spoiler.
Hey, if they haven't seen it by now, they need to.
That's true. That's my own fault. I haven't seen it.
That's tough though. I don't know if I can do that.
Some people can though. That's the thing.
I don't think I could.
That's a few men. It's a few. Very few.
Ain't that cold.
Some people are.
So our next discussion is, do you think you should celebrate Christmas before Thanksgiving? Like this past weekend, there was the Christmas parade, and then there's like the tree lighting at North Hills, Winterfest. Like they
Setting
had
up
a whole lot of
decorations.
Christmas things this past weekend, and a lot of people are decorating for Christmas. So do you guys think that Christmas should be celebrated before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving?
Does anybody really care?
I feel like some do, some don't.
Yeah, I mean, I like celebrating before Thanksgiving, or I start celebrating.
I mean, to be honest, I'm just here for the food.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like it is a whole holiday though, so
Yeah.
you just can't just throw it out the window.
Yeah, but it seems like people don't value the holidays anymore anyway because, like, you're celebrating Christmas before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You're demeaning the value of Thanksgiving by saying Christmas is more important, so it should be celebrated earlier. It kind of demeans Christmas in a way because it basically seems like it's just a money grab now. Because think about Black Friday right after Thanksgiving. Sales. Christmas seems like the better and lighter holiday to celebrate than Thanksgiving anyway. So that's probably maybe why they celebrate that before Thanksgiving now.
I mean, I don't know, but Christmas kind of lit though. You know, you got a Christmas music. We ain't got Thanksgiving music really. I mean, besides was it Shirley Caesar got the green potato? Well, we got a whole category for it. So,
I feel like celebrating Christmas early is a lot of people's traditions for Thanksgiving because, like, people put up the tree, they start listening to Christmas music. It's actually kind of a Thanksgiving tradition in a way. It's just like Christmas is right around the corner.
Watch Christmas movies on Thanksgiving
Yeah.
Day. That's what my family does.
And then like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, it's like the Christmas parade on Thanksgiving. I like celebrating Christmas like before Thanksgiving. I don't mind because we kind of do it like a combination at my house.
Same.
And so it's like we leave Thanksgiving as like that's Thanksgiving Day, but we can also watch Christmas movies and stuff. And I just like getting into the holiday spirit early because it's a stressful time, especially for students with exams and things. And so if you can just like listen to Christmas music in the car or, watch the good holiday movies, it's fun and more relaxing.
Well, and they're so close in time together too.
Yeah.
That they kind of intertwine anyways because they're only like a month apart.
Mm-hmm. And then Christmas, it only happens once. Like, celebrate it.
Thanksgiving.
Love
Thanksgiving
Christmas.
happens once.
So celebrate it. Like, you can just celebrate all these
So you on the
things.
side of Thanksgiving and Christmas is what I'm hearing.
I think Christmas, like Christmas before Thanksgiving is fine. I like it.
No, I ain't gonna lie. I just like listening to Justin Bieber Mistletoe. Yeah, the Christmas stuff. That's a vibe. You know what I'm saying?
I do believe Peace should have a football team. I think it'd be great for the school to add another sport. There are some concerns with that, as far as like where you're going to have 50, 60 plus players, as far as our housing, where they are going to go. So I think that's something the school should at least think about, something that's down the line, maybe about 5 or 10 years from now if they get another dorm on campus to house football players. But I think it'll be great. I think it'll be something that alumni could come to because I know football is a huge tradition. And I think it's something that could start and it could really just set off our whole athletic program with adding another dominant sport.
I think if you add football to Peace, it would be even more of like a community feel as well because everybody likes going to the games together, and then they have like the theme games like Blackout, stuff like that, and that gets students really involved. So it would be fun, I think.
I mean, assuming you figured out, like you said, where to put 50 or 60 players and find a place to play and all that stuff. I mean, it would be great for business and for the school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I mean, everybody knows football is a revenue sport. I mean, everybody loves football, so something to think about.
Definitely for like 10 years in the future, maybe 5 years.
I'll be mad.
Next couple years, probably not, but in the future.
I'll be mad
Why?
because I can't play.
They can have an alumni game. They can have an
Yeah, that
alumni
could be an
football
alumni
game.
night.
Do a
We
flag
can all go back, yeah. Alumni football game. That'd be fun.
So, quick question for you: how big of a sports fan are you?
I'm a huge sports fan. I'm very involved in the NFL. I'm a huge NFL fan. I'm big into basketball. I play basketball all my life, so I'm really big into the NBA. I'm big into college basketball, maybe not as much as college football, but I'm huge into those two main sports.
So, what do you think about the CTE in football?
I think there are some pros and cons to football and head injuries. I feel as though I understand what the NFL, as far as college football, is trying to do, as far as protecting players. At the end of the day, I think that referees are always put in a hard spot to be able to have to make a call. But I do feel like the game has softened up some as well. Like, early in the season, we saw Clay Matthews get two, roughing the passer penalties on plays that looked like normal sacks. And so I think it's tough. It's very bang, bang. It's very, very, very quick. I just want them to keep those rules that they have, just to keep them consistent with all players. I'm a huge, Panthers fan, and so I watch all the games, and I see that, some quarterbacks, get officiated some ways, and then other quarterbacks like Cam Newton get officiated a little bit differently. And so I would just like for the league just to keep those things consistent, and I think that'll be best for the league. But I think CTE is important. I think we've seen in history, the effects that it has on retired football players. Some of them maybe have murdered people or committed suicides and things like that. So I like the direction the league is going, being progressive, trying to stop the head injuries.
Speaking of the Panthers, what do you think about Cam Newton's dress code?
I love the way Cam Newton dresses. I like the way that he expresses himself, no matter what people think. I think it's the way that he dresses is a culture that's came through the team. Like you see, the owner David Tepper wants to get some drip, so he purchases the hats, and then Ron Rivera has these shirts that he has on Mondays when he does his press conference. It could be about anything. So I think I like the fact that he's creative. He shows his leadership in multiple different ways, and so that's just the way that he does it off the field.
I love his dress code. Love it. Very expressive. Flashy.
And I think something a lot of people don't know is when Cam Newton dressed, like the way he dresses, he also puts on and markets. This is free advertisement. He markets local, fashion designers. Not everything he wears is Givenchy, Gucci, or Prada. The hats that he actually wears are like somebody that's local, I think in the Charlotte area. And just helping, put somebody else on and help them sell hats and help their brand is great. I think that's excellent.
I just think he needs to loosen up how tight his pants are. And after that, he's good.
Did we have how it was? But I rocks with it though. I rocks with the style.
Yeah, I think his style is nice. I just wish as a unit, as good as Cam Newton dress, I wish the team would be more consistent in how they play week to week. So if they would do that, then I think they'll be a whole lot better.
Speaking of your team, I don't want those shots though. You said we was gonna get smacked, but we smacked y'all. Still fan over here, just by the way.
I think that Thursday night game it was very embarrassing. It was very, very embarrassing. I think the issue that the Panthers have, they have an issue defensively. They have a rookie defensive. I ain't gonna say a rookie defensive coordinator, but this is a first year defensive coordinator, and he's had some questionable moves. I think offensively, we're starting to find a rhythm. I think Norv Turner's played great. I think Cam Newton has played good all year. But I think some changes need to be made in efforts of us, getting better in the future. I think they made a move, letting C.J. Anderson go. I think about a week ago, which I think was a good decision. It allows him the opportunity to go and play somewhere else. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. He just didn't really fit in our system. And so I think that's good. A move that I think the team should make. I think they should either trade, waive, or release Devin Funchess. I think we've seen years and years of mediocrity from him, and we haven't really seen the production. He's played in the league 4 seasons now. Never had a major injury. He plays more than 12, 13 games a season, and he hasn't put up a 1,000-yard season. He hasn't put up a 900-yard season. I think his best season, he had like 840 yards. He has issues with catching the ball. He has issues with route separation. And I think in order to go forward, you want to be able to protect your quarterback. If you can't get separation in your route running, Cam Newton wants to be able to find plays. So he has to go out and run. And, this is getting to his 8th, 9th year in the league. And so I think the health of him really comes into question. I think he wants to be more of a pocket passer this year. I think we're starting to see that. His completion percentage has increased, which is a good thing. And I think he wants to be more of a pocket passer. I actually don't think he wants to get out and run as much as he used to. And so I think the direction that the team is going, we need to get some young guys in there who can get separation, who can catch the ball. And I think that's just a move that I feel like they need to make.
And your history career is sports broadcaster.
So the question, is it morally acceptable for the United States to prepare schools for an active shooter rather than put restrictions on guns?
I just want to say one thing. By the start of that sentence, I know whoever wrote that was in C in ethics. Is it more than C in ethics right there?
Yeah.
I know that for real, but continue.
My personal opinion, I think there should be more restrictions on guns rather than prepare for the active shooter in class. I was watching the news the other night and they were teaching high schoolers how to save your classmate's life in case they got shot, and there was something you could do. And I think with all the tests and everything they go through, that's more added stress that even though this is the world we live in now, it's more added stress than high schoolers or anybody should have to be put under. It's to save your classmate's life. So what are your thoughts?
I say there's 2 sides to every coin. There's preparing for schools for active shooter is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because you don't want your kids obviously to have to worry about trying to save a life when you're just trying to get an education. But then again, we put restrictions on guns. People are still finding ways to get guns, and shootings are still happening some way somehow. So it's just I don't know if there's really a true answer to one or the other. I think you have to do really both, to be honest, for that.
Can you share what you said about? We was talking about this before. Yeah, it had me mind blown.
So I just used an example of my siblings live in England, and so they don't really deal with this a lot. My brother's fiance, she doesn't want to move to America because she's a teacher, and she's I couldn't imagine having to deal with an active shooter coming in. They don't do active shooter drills, stuff like that. And so I think that's what we were talking about on one of the other podcasts, how it's crazy the cultural difference.
Yeah.
It's something they don't have to worry about. It's
Yeah.
and that's what really caught me because I was dang, I can't imagine that's crazy. They come over here, they can't imagine having to deal with it. It's I can't imagine not having to deal with it. So I was just mind blown by that. It was just
I get preparing for an active shooter by the drills and stuff even we go through. But do you guys think it's a little much to be preparing as much as they are now?
I think to an extent, yeah, some of them are a little pushed, but so my high school was the rival school of Columbine High School. So the first big mass shooting. So we always did really big drills, even before there were new restrictions and stuff, just because obviously when something like that big happens at a high school, you naturally do bigger drills. So I've always been doing those drills. So the drills obviously are good. I think doing normal drills you need to hide to this classroom, lock yourself in this classroom are fine, but going to an extent where how you were saying that they are teaching the kids how to protect their classmates and how to save their lives if they need to. I think that's a little much because they're kids. They shouldn't have to be worrying about that. That's the way our society is, but at the same time, that shouldn't be their responsibility.
I feel
I
that.
think it just depends on what exactly they're doing. Because, I mean, I feel like you should be preparing, but I guess it just depends on what that method is. And it's a matter of situation. I mean, as far as restrictions on guns, I think there needs to be some type of vetting process as far as who can get a gun and who can't. I don't know all the details of how that would work, but that's just my opinion. I think it's a matter of situation. Because like you said, there's two sides to everything. So
It's like no matter how hard people try, guns are still going to be available
Yep.
everywhere. It's a money thing. It's connected to the government in a way that if you get rid of guns, it kind of hurts the government in a way because they're in their pocket. So that's why the gun initiative hasn't been attacked more in a general sense, because the government's connected into it. And it's a situation now where you kind of have to do these active shooter drills because as life goes, it's constant adaptment to every situation and everything that comes across you. And now with the situation of mass shootings are getting a rise and coming up more, so you got to prepare the people that are involved or that are in life now that have to experience this. In the 70s, you ain't got to worry about active shooters. You got to worry about drugs. But now, active shooters is a thing. So if you want to save our youth and save our people, we have to prepare them for the situations that are unfortunate that are going to come upon us.
I mean, there's other ways that you can prepare them, like just being preventative and like mental health there's obviously been like that whole push recently about putting people's mental health first and like just really putting emphasis on that because it hasn't been addressed in decades past and in past generations. So I think just addressing that issue is going to help with like gun issues. You know, like it's also like that preventative stuff, not just that like let's prepare them in case it happens. Let's make sure that like situation doesn't happen to begin with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People usually only talk about mental health after something like that happens. Like that's the most disappointing part. It shouldn't be just a discussion when something bad happens. It should be an everyday discussion. You have so many resources out there nowadays for people to get help, but they never do because whether it's looked down upon in their society or wherever they're from, or they feel that they don't need it, or they're just not educated about their own mental health. And I think that goes down to, not just, parents, but also like teachers at school, advisors, all that. That's part of the job nowadays is to make sure students are healthy mentally. And it shouldn't just be like a once in a while discussion. It needs to be an everyday discussion.
Yeah, I know like in my family, like we never really talked like about mental health and stuff. I remember my freshman year here at Peace in my psych class, we had to do like a family tree of like mental disorders and like if anybody had anything, and like I literally was so scared to even talk to my parents about it because it was never a discussion that we ever talked about, because like my family, like if you're like dealing with something, you kind of just like deal with it yourself and like kind of work through it by yourself. And like so I literally didn't even do the assignment because I was like so scared to talk to like my mom or dad about it because it's like not talked about enough, I don't think. And in high school was the first time mental health was ever like I had ever even heard about that. Like I heard about people having like the big disorders where you have like ADHD or you have even like bigger stuff like schizophrenia, but like every day just like general anxiety. Like I think like this statistic is like 1 in 4 people at some point in their life are affected by a mental health issue, whether you are diagnosed with something or you had just this like point in time where you were just like severely depressed. Whether it's temporary or like a day-to-day thing that you struggle with, like you're gonna probably run into somebody, you probably know somebody, or you're gonna run into it yourself. So it's like, if it's that common, and it's like a broken record, people talking about how like the stigma around mental health and like it's a broken record, we hear it all the time, but the active change to do anything about that, I don't think is happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I agree with you, and it's like things after a shooting happens. You always hear the interviews with the people in the community saying, "Oh, I never thought this would happen to us,"
Yeah.
or they would be like, they wouldn't focus on like the mental health side. Like it seems like the shooters, they do have like a mental health problem, whether it be like the shooting in California, he was a veteran. And so like a lot of his neighbors said that they saw things that were kind of like alarming.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it seems like the shooters, they do have a problem, but it just never got brought up enough. Like there was little alarming things, but it just never.
And I feel like as a society, we lack empathy when it comes to that kind of stuff, because it is like this person killed X amount of people. Like that's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But for him or her to carry out such an act, like you kind of have to like think twice about like and have like a little empathy. So you're like, how could somebody do this? Like what's going on in their life? And I feel like we don't do that because people just have so much hatred for what they did instead of the why. I feel like that's where like a lot of lost in translation and like kind of just like gets pushed to the back because we just focus on the what, which is like terrible because people's lives were taken and it like one death affects way more than just their immediate family, like friends, a community, everything, churches, whatever. But that the shooter is also obviously had an affected life. Like they're a person too. Like not someone isn't born with that kind of hatred in their heart.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like something had to have happened. Something like neglected as a kid or severely depressed, bullied, whatever. Like you have to think about the shooter. Like you have to have some sort of empathy for them because the why just gets lost. I think.
Well, and without that why, there's no way it's going to be fixed anytime soon. Without people thinking, why did it happen? And how can we prevent it from happening again? Before it happens again, there's no way it's going to be fixed in the future.
I feel
Even
like
with gun restrictions.
That's the what is like the guns. Like let's just put restrictions on the guns. But like what everyone always says is like a gun doesn't shoot a person shoots a person.
Yep. Yeah.
So
And also too, I mean, we're in an age where like between, you know, you can say media, politicians, whatever side of the aisle you're on, when something like this happens, instead of our leaders of this country, you know, standing up to find those reasons why, it's just they're pointing to the other side of the aisle saying it's their fault.
At the same time, though, like I don't think you can deny like all of the research from other countries that have really strict gun restrictions that show that it really works for them. So I think like, and I mean just the fact that if someone has a knife, it will logically take them longer to kill as many people as it will take them with a gun. So I think there are things like that that they're thinking about that like while yes, like there are definitely other issues that need to be hit, there is, I mean it is a Band-Aid solution, but it's a Band-Aid solution that could save a lot of lives.
yeah.
So I think that's where
But I think like with American values, because like I know in my family, my dad hunts, so we have shotguns and like pistols and all that kind of stuff. And like as like an American culture, like that has always been kind of in our culture. Is like, especially in the South, like a lot of people hunt, a lot of people like go shooting. Like that's like it's a sport. It is a sport, like sporting place, whatever. But I think like for our culture, I don't think gun restrictions is going to work for us. I understand like it working for other countries, but with our American culture, I think that's going to upset more people than it is to fix a problem.
And also too, some of the strictest cities with gun laws in the United States are Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, and those also have some of the highest gun death rates as well. So I'm not saying that definitely won't work. I'm saying it definitely will. I'm just saying that, you know, it's going to be different for every city. It's going to be different for every situation. Not every, you know, terrible act of violence will be the same.
But it is something that has to be comprehensive. Cause
Yeah,
like,
it's something that should be
if
talked
I can
about.
walk to the next town beside Los Angeles and buy that gun, it's a lot different. Whereas if it was a little, like, you know, whereas everywhere had the same restrictions. So that's something else that would
And
change
like I understand the restrictions on like being able to shoot a gun way faster than a normal person should be able to shoot it, like military grade stuff. Like that shouldn't be legal. Like I don't think that should be legal.
Yeah.
Because no normal person should be shooting a gun like that many rounds that fast.
And there's different levels of restrictions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like I'm not saying like, oh, nobody can have a gun and like that's like the restriction that like whatever the restriction or whatever. Like I'm not saying that like just what you're saying is like taking away all guns is gonna solve the problem. I think taking away military grade stuff, like that's a good
start.
one. That's a good one that I think
Yeah.
we should put into place. But I think just axing it all together, that's not going to happen, especially with a lot of people that do hunt and that kind of stuff.
I feel like something has to happen though, because
Yeah.
hearing "you're in my thoughts and prayers," like that's enough. Like that's
Yeah.
just kind of annoying to hear
Oh,
when
yeah.
you have like the same thing happen over and over again.
And that also killed the issue. Because when you hear something so much, it gets repetitive and you stop caring. Because every time you hear it, it just grows less and less in value. And you just keep hearing it, it just grows. So it comes to a point where you got to figure out, going back to the mental health thing, there's a reason this person grabs a gun and shoots people. There's a reason he feels like he's secluded from everybody else because they're talking about him. And he doesn't want to talk to nobody because he'll keep getting bullied, keep getting talked about. So to start the conversation with that person, and in that, for the individual, with all the people, about why is the person acting like this, that's where the real solutions get held, when people start to talk about what they're going through, what mental issues they have, what their family been through, what their friends are going through. We just got to start talking to each other more. Because we see everything literally every day. That's another reason we have some of these mental health issues. Because we literally can go on our cell phone and see anything and everything we want in Google, on YouTube. It's too accessible. At one point, we weren't seeing all of this stuff that's happening in the world every day. But now we're seeing it, and it's starting to freak some of us out without us even realizing it.
I mean, with that kind of like accessibility to news and stuff, like it kind of just gets flushed out and with the next topic. So I think that's also an issue.
I feel like if we actually knew the amount of people around us that actually that actually struggle with mental health, like we would be like blown away, because it's so common,
Yeah.
and that's where it starts. That's where the stuff starts.
I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day because I was like, when did it get so like when did life get so like incredibly stressful? Because I know growing up, of course, you're not aware about like adult things, but it seems like everybody I know now has more panic attacks or anxiety attacks or is dealing with depression, having to be on medications, stuff like this. So it's like, when did that, it just seems kind of like overwhelming just because of the friends that I have that I know that really seriously go through things like this.
I think not doing anything at all is definitely not the way to go. And I also think, I don't think every person that does something wrong, every mass shooter, honestly, you don't have to have a mental illness to be able to do a crazy thing. You know what I'm saying? You gotta, some of these people might have had mental illnesses, and that very well may be true, but you don't necessarily have to have a mental illness to go in there and shoot up a church or shoot up a synagogue or something like that. Maybe you have that hate in your heart, and that hate in your heart might not be a mental health issue. That just maybe just are who you are. I think a lot of times if we look at, if we go back and we look at, I know you were speaking on American culture, let's take a deep look into American culture. And let's look at what Americans have done, you know what I'm saying? Like, look at our history. Look at the 60s, the 30s, before Reconstruction, slavery, you know what I'm saying? If we look deep inside some of those things, I don't think a lot of mental illness was there. I think there was intent and there was hate there. So we can't just, I think some people have mental illnesses, but I don't think that should be a scapegoat for why people are out here killing people the way that they do. I just think some people have hate in their heart. And I do feel like there should be restrictions on gun control, because I do feel, like she said, in other countries, I know Australia, for instance, I think it'll work. I understand some people do. I know hunting is big, and I think that's great. But I'm not saying nobody should have a gun, but I think we need to be able to put some form of restrictions on it, and we also need to try restrictions, because I don't feel like we have tried to do anything.
I agree.
And I think that's just something that we need to start somewhere. I think doing something is the right step. You know what I'm saying? And I do feel like it is connected with the government. I do feel like there is a monetary benefit to guns being out here in the streets. And along with drugs, I feel like there's a monetary benefit for the government for drugs to be out here. But I do feel as though if mental health is the issue, elementary school, middle school, high school, there needs to be more people who are trained and professionals on the mind of Americans. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's something that should start. And it could you can have somebody on the scene who can actually evaluate kids, like I said, from elementary school and work their way up. And I think that's something that'll help. And hopefully, with gun restrictions, along with addressing mental illness, hopefully we can begin to see a decrease in number as far as the mass shootings that we have.
And like piggyback off that, when you was like about the elementary, middle school. To be honest, I didn't really I wasn't aware of like all the mental health issues until I came to college. Like she said, you hear like the little things like ADHD and stuff like that, but I wasn't aware like how big it was until like I came to college and got informed about it. So in a sense, this is all new to me. So like, in a sense, like it makes sense like go back to like when you're growing up. That way you are already alert to it and you got more information. The more information, the better, obviously. But it's new, so it's like some of us wasn't raised. Like she said, she wasn't raised. Like I can agree that we weren't raised like express our feelings and talk about it. Cause like I can honestly tell you, like I never talked to anybody about anything I was going through. Like she said, you just deal with it on your own. You just find your way to how to cope with it. So, but I definitely agree with that.
And I feel like a major flaw in our society is just lack of communication, whether it's with a different political party or with your feelings. Like, ooh, that's always like, ooh, talk about your feelings. But like that lack of communication I feel like it's just a common theme with a lot of issues. And with this issue, it's not, one thing isn't going to fix it. Like, helping mental health isn't going to fix the whole problem. Like, restricting guns isn't going to fix the whole problem. It's going to be a combination of stuff. So I feel like we just need to find, like, America's combo that works for us, that decreases, like, these mass shootings. Because, like, I was watching the news one day, and it was, like, 305 days out of, like, 300, like, whatever days that's happened this year, there's been some type of mass shooting. Like, that's crazy. To only have like a couple days out of the year that you don't have a mass shooting, like that's crazy. And I feel like putting facts and statistics out like that to really like open people's eyes, like there's a serious problem, but we don't know how to deal with it, that we're just kind of ignoring it. I think there are people that are pushing for it, like legislators are pushing, like we need to restrict guns, and like having like one thing that they want to restrict. But I feel like someone should just come out and be like, here's a plan that hits multiple different things, that let's try this instead of trying this one thing. Let's try a whole plan that we put into place, because like something needs to happen, obviously. Like we can all agree on that.
Like you said, like lack of communication, and like back what he was saying, like as far as both sides of parties, like they quit point fingers. I think, like you said, there's lack of communication, and like I think we don't try to understand one another. I think we just so quick to point the finger and go to blah blah blah. We don't try to understand. And I think that's where it all starts.
A lot of people now have the intent to talk and not listen.
Exactly.
And some people are hearing and not listening.
I mean, it's like when you pass somebody you know in the hallway or wherever, and you say, well, how are you, or what's going on? Do you really want to know?
Yeah, it's
Or is it just like,
just
hey, this is what we say when we see each other.
Yeah.
Like, hey, okay. Like, do you really want to know what's going on? That's something to think about.
And then, like before, social media puts all that pressure on you, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody is displaying their best life on social
Everybody's
media.
behind a
I mean,
screen.
Instagram's the highlights.
You're not
It's
seeing
not-
their days.
Yeah.
So when you do have those bad days, you feel alone, because around
That's why
you,
you have
everyone's
Twitter.
posting all these awesome pictures that makes it look like their life's so great. When in reality, everybody has those bad days. We're just getting really good at hiding it online.
Yeah.
And all people know is our online persona instead of who we really are.
But like, just going back, like just speaking, like you said, just speaking. Like if you actually just take the time out, like speak and actually mean it, like, and somebody can feel that, like that little difference can go a long way. You know?
But just like my dad tells me a lot, there's a lot of people out here that don't care about you.
That's
But the
right.
people that are in your life, your family, and your close friends. So it breeds a mentality of a lot of selfish people, or a lot of people that just don't care about other people, going around trying to get what they need in their life and then just move on. How many people you know just want to sit in class and just go home? Don't want to talk to nobody, just want to get what they got to get and get out. And I feel like it's more with the gun issue. It's kind of a historical problem because what America was built on, if people really pay attention, was money, power, and war. Just from my brain anyway. You got people, like I said, people came over, took over the first settlers in America. Then slavery happened. And now they're trying to make money off everything and everybody where the guns come in. Only reason I don't think they're trying to do anything with the guns is because it affects money. At the end of the day, it just comes down to money and power. That's all I think those people care about at the higher ups in the government office. It's money and power. That's it. That's why things don't really change much, because it affects their status and how much money they get in their pockets.
I used to think about how the world would be without money, like just trading and bargaining and doing favors for each other. I used to think about that. Like, am I the only one? Like,
No, I've had this discussion before with someone, like, 'cause it's interesting to think, like, how would we still be able to continue innovation and technology the way that we've been going if we went back to that system?
Yeah.
But you could see how ethically it would solve so many problems if we went back to that. But then you have other issues. So,
It's a trade-off. Trade-off and balance.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
I mean, I heard it put into words like we're kind of like a culture of death. If that makes sense? Which is like super like morbid, like ooh. But like when you talk about like all these like major issues, it's like a lot of like life issues, like abortion and like mass shootings and gun control and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a lot about like life or death. And like in a lot of our like culture, it's like kind of death instead of just like promoting like the human. Like, hey, let's just look at a whole human and be like, you are a person and you have feelings and everything. Instead, we're looking at like money and all that kind of stuff. So I've always like, well, I went to Catholic school, so that's why I kind of have that kind of view. But like, just like looking at like, just like look at a person and be like, hey, like you're a person with feelings and thoughts and everything, whether it's someone you like or you don't like or whatever, like you are still like a whole person. Like I remember, like you know when you're driving, you're like driving for a long time, you have like these weird thoughts that are just like so deep, and you're like, whoa, they kind of scare you. One of them was like, if you think about how like, I'm trying to think of a word, like complex your own life is, and like all the stuff that you've been through and everything. Like, and then you're like, whoa, every other person in the world has like that same kind of complexity where there's so many different pieces and so many different parts. And I don't know, that's just like, those are like one of those like crazy thoughts where you're like, whoa, like life's kind of weird.
Everyone's going through something.
Like, yeah.
And kind of going back to the communicating thing, you know, especially nowadays, like if you are like, you talked about, we were talking about Beauty and the Beast earlier, and you know how some people's perception of like you look at you and you look at a person, you automatically make that judgment against them. You know, oh, they feel this way about this. Oh, then they definitely feel this way about all this. Well, there's so many people like you know, me for example, I may have leaned to one side on this, I may lean to one side on this. You know, I have my own thoughts, I have my own way of thinking, and people are so quickly to judge your character by one belief or judge a character by one decision, you know, all that stuff. And I think as a society, we need to focus on is not so much separating each other by race, political affiliation, all that stuff, is being able to communicate and come together and say, how are we all going to fix this problem? Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm Hispanic, you know, my parents were born in Cuba. They came to this country when they were, you know, small kids, and I'm a first generation, but I'm an American. You know, I was born here. You know, you're an American. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you came from. If you're in this country and you were born here and you're a citizen, you're an American. And I think that's what we need to focus on more instead of trying to separate each other.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I like tell people like, oh, I'm Catholic, especially like down in like the South,
Yeah,
or whatever, I like definitely get like pegged really quickly. But like when I start like talking to people and like having a conversation, like I remember, so I played club volleyball back in high school, and we were in Orlando, and we had a Muslim girl, I was Catholic, and we had a bunch of Christians, and we were staying by the pool at a volleyball tournament, 17 years old, talking about religion. I was mind blown because we were having a real conversation and people were just asking questions like, oh, I don't understand this about your faith. Can you explain that a little more? Like, I was like happy to answer questions at that point because it was like the first time that someone's like, oh, you're Catholic, that's okay. Can I learn more? And then we started having those conversations. So I learned so much about like the Muslim faith. I learned so much about the Christian faith and like the differences and all that. So just like having conversations and actually listening and being curious. I think being curious is like the biggest thing ever. And like just being curious about something, because if you're not curious about it, what's gonna make you ask like a reasonable question or like a deep question? If you genuinely don't want to know. Like just having these conversations of like, oh, like we're gonna have a conversation about like gun restrictions, and if you have this like already set in your mind that like you're gonna go in and this is what you're gonna talk about, instead of just like sitting there and listening and like going back to what you said about we're hearing things and just already preparing an answer in our mind instead of listening and like hearing their side. Like there's some things that we're gonna just have to agree to disagree on because it's a little bit more black and white, but there's always that gray in between, you know.
Anybody else want to say anything? Anybody?
Going once, going twice. All right.
It's actually a great place to end, talking
Yeah.
about the power of conversation, because this was a really great conversation. I'm, as an older person, I'll say I hope you guys figure this out, because it's going to be your generation. At this point, I think we're pretty much out, just like we saw in our watch. So
Thank you for coming.
we'll help out as much as we can as you guys figure this thing out. Nice job.
That's all for our live podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week.